not telling you again. What you need is just a slap around to make everything stop and kill the fall when you come back down. I'm not everything you want, I'm just a tease. Maybe I'm out of touch. You could tell me what you want, I'll give it to you. Maybe you think too much, 'cause you're Hollywood, you never should. We never talk anymore. With your high heels on, you kill the sun. I'm not your friend anymore. Now I'm so sick and tired of everyone telling you what you want. I can never keep track of who's gonna come when you start waving your magic wand. And you seem to forget everything that you said before you had it written for you. There's too much going on that you need to belong to. It's the only thing you know how to do. 'Cause you're Hollywood, another one. You made it all on your own. With your high heels on, you kill the sun. I'm not your friend anymore.
Our program will begin shortly. Kindly be seated, and please remember to silence your mobile devices.
Takes my eye, I lift my head, blinded by the sky. Feel my way in front, following the sound. It moves away so fast, falling to the ground. I know there's more to come. Jump back to my feet. Now I only
Please welcome General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, Sharon Burrow.
Whoa. Hi there. So, it's getting to that time of the afternoon, but we've got some really exciting commitments for you to hear about. This is really about climate action with people, with just transition. You all know that if we don't bring people with us, then we get fear, opposition, mistrust. If we get working people, their communities at the table with those making the decisions, whether it's cities, industries, hopefully our national governments will even raise their ambitions at some point. But certainly today, we have the first panel, which is a group of inspiring leaders from Vancouver. The Mayor of who's first? Actually, it's actually the Mayor of Oslo. Come on, and you know, you got to get it right. Give him a big hand. Raymond Jansen, a very courageous man, and his partner in crime, the Labour leader of the Norwegian LO, Hans Christian Gabrielsen. And then we have another exciting couple, strange couple, you know, like this is like new partnerships, but indeed they're both fantastic people. And of course we have the Mayor of Vancouver, who is Gregor Robertson. And again, another friend of mine from Vancouver, who is in fact Irene Lansiger, and she's the president of the Federation of Labour. So what's happening here is a partnership in both cities, Oslo and indeed Vancouver, about how to make our cities incredibly livable, but also to create jobs, to drive new supply chain industries and services. And I'm not going to tell you about it because I'm going to actually ask, first of all, Oslo, because I know Hans Christian has to leave for a plane. So if I can actually ask, indeed, Raymond, can I ask you, tell us what the Oslo model for just transition is?
Well, in a nutshell, we can say it's about social dialogue. It's about inclusion, and it's about how to include the workers in our planning and carry out and also accomplish measures to reduce Oslo's climate emissions. We need the people on board. We need to cooperate with the unions, and in Norway, we have a long historical tradition to have a close cooperation with the unions, and therefore also to make the green shift easier, because people are quite afraid of losing their jobs. So they need to be included in every step of the planning and be a partner and also embrace this green shift. That's what it is.
But we know that you have big plans. You want Oslo to effectively be a carless city with mass transit, and that means jobs in supply chains, but it means translating that plan into the trust for people, workers and citizens. So tell us what, in you know, a couple of sentences, what will Oslo look like in 10 years' time?
A human-friendly city. We want to build a city for humans, not for cars. So the inner...
Now that's tweetable. Come on, send it out there. You want to build a city for people, not for cars.
But, of course, this green shift, people, because we will have shops, we need to deliver goods. People who lives and who works in the shops, they probably are afraid of what's happened, so they need to be on board in this shift, and we need to discuss with them how we will impose this, because often the green shift and impose of the new technology, we know from now that 1/3 of probably all the ordinary jobs in Oslo will disappear. So we will create new green jobs together with the workers and together with the unions, but we need a regulated labor market. And for a regulated market, we embrace that people are a member of unions, so they can voice what they are saying, voice themselves, and be partners. Because if they just are individuals, so we just carry them around, it's better to be involved. And Oslo will be environmental friendly city. People will move to the city. We will compete with other cities. We need the people to come to Oslo, to work to Oslo, and we need to cooperate closely with unions and the workers.
So that's setting up some big ambitions, but it has big challenges. Hans Christian, you know, you have all those fearful people in your membership. So I know you're committed to the vision, but what's the next steps?
The next steps. Today we signed a common pledge to establish a Just Transition Task Force in Oslo.
Wow, give them a big hand. A Just Transition Task Force in Oslo. This is a challenge to Vancouver now.
So that is the next step. So that's not why I'm leaving so early. But Raymond here will and the trade union will start this work to see how we best can take the workers on board, the trade unions, how we can cooperate to solve some of the big issues, the big challenges, because Oslo has a very ambitious climate strategy. And believe it or not, but politicians also need some good advice from the trade union. Okay. And this is one of the ways that you can create trust in the decisions that are being made, and you can also create more solid, more solid decisions that can last and stay, because the discussion has been made. So the worries that the working people have has been put to the table, and I believe that in this way we can make more solid decisions, more speedy decisions that really can help Oslo achieve some of the ambitious goals that they have set. And I think that when we are done, Sharon, my ambition is to create a model agreement then that other cities also can use for creating just transition.
That's just excellent. So a Just Transition Centre, a vision for a carless city, livable, friendly, people moving back to the cities. It's fantastic commitment, but and we know how hard it is to get there. So wish them well, give them a big hand, and let's say thank you for being one of the first to make those commitments. And of course, if we go to Vancouver, which is another one of the great cities of the world, then Gregor, what is your vision for the city, and how does Just Transition work for that?
The most, I think, important and relevant point here, Vancouver has a goal to be the greenest city in the world, and we have a commitment to be 100% powered by renewable energy. Those are commitments that we've made at our council, and within both frameworks, basically, we have a commitment to just transition, because it will involve lots of change to people's livelihoods. And not only in the city, obviously we have to stay focused at home and make sure that we're addressing this at home, working with all of our partners in the labor movement, all of the workers in the city and how they're represented, and make sure that they're at the table as we implement all of these steps and these big changes. And very similar to what Oslo is doing in terms of shifting people out of cars as aggressively as we can do that, and transforming to zero-emission buildings, and we have a plan to do that by 100% by 2030. That involves a lot of transition within construction and development and retraining. So let's
say that again. So emission-free buildings by 2030.
Yeah, all
That's
buildings.
A pretty good vision. Going to get a clap for that? Yeah.
So we, and also recognizing, I mean, we've done this work at home. We recently had a climate change and just transition conference, a symposium that we did together, planned together with BC Federation of Labor and other partners to really dig into what does this look like on the ground? How's this going to work? And so and now our next step is to have a Just Transition Commission in the city. We're pledging to do that as a formal step to establish that commission.
Better give them a hand too.
I would say that it goes beyond, I mean, the reality when we say we're going to go 100% renewable and take the city off of fossil fuels, that obviously affects all of the workers in the fossil fuel producing communities upstream, literally upstream, as we're at the ocean. So we, we recognize that we have to be part of that just transition for those workers. And our city is thriving. We're much like Oslo. We're attracting jobs and investment. It's not based on fossil fuels. It's based on renewables and low carbon industries. And we have to figure out how we support the communities that are going through that transition. And in our part of the world, it's not so much coal, it's oil and gas, where those communities have been hard hit in recent years, especially with the price of gas plummeting. And as a city, we're taking out the natural gas over these next few decades. So we had quite a bit of controversy and conflict around, once they realized 100% renewable meant bad news for the natural gas industry. We were attacked, and so now we've worked into a much more constructive relationship with a memorandum of understanding with the major gas utility, and talking about just transition. And that's similarly with the oil that's produced in northern Alberta and pipeline controversy. We have to work out with them, what does just transition look like for that industry as it scales down and ultimately we phase out of fossil fuels. We need to be working together on that.
Yeah, and we know, as terrific as it is, and we're celebrating the commitments here this week, you know, you will create many jobs in just in the emissions-free buildings, retrofit, new building technologies, a circular economy, kind of transition. But Irene, we know how painful it is, particularly when you go to those who will be displaced, how we reinvent their communities with new investments. Oil and gas, coal, particularly, these things are really tough. So as head of the BC Federation, what's the next steps to make sure that we're not just supporting the vision, but we're bringing everybody along?
Well, I think these just transition task forces are very important. And so I really commend Oslo and Vancouver for that. And I want to add that in Vancouver, that commission is looking not only at just transition for the workers, but equitable access. So how does climate change affect the poor and the vulnerable in our city? And so we've talked a lot about climate justice, but this is a commitment to look at that issue. There are various ways in which workers are effective. So you have the kind of tidy thing, even though it's complicated and difficult and hard to negotiate, of the phase out of a coal plant, where you have to look at pension continuation, adding to employment insurance premiums, retraining for younger workers. You have to have a plan for every single worker in that institution who's going to lose their jobs. And if you listen to Gil McGowan from Alberta, he'll talk about how he was successful as a labor leader in working with those workers because they had a sense of resignation and inevitability, not because they wanted to give up their good job. So I think that the model that they used in Alberta of really going out and talking to workers about their fears and having them listen to and understanding what was going to happen, and then looking at workers in every phase of their work and what they needed. And it's going to take a commitment of resources. I will say that in British Columbia, it's not going to be that tidy because workers are going to gradually transition. We're a fairly clean energy province with hydroelectricity. But what I will say about that is that one of the things we have to say And part of our narrative in talking about next steps has to be how good social programs and good government policy plays a big role. The reason the Just Transition is working in Vancouver and will work in Vancouver is because Vancouver is a living wage employer. They don't pay anybody under $21 an hour. And almost all the work in Vancouver is done by union workers. It is the city in Vancouver, and it means it has the lowest rate of contracting out work of any city in North America. So it is a highly unionized city. And if we had that model in our provinces and in our countries, then the Just Transition discussion would be a much easier one.
Fantastic. Now, I know the time's up, so is there just anything that anyone wants to say before we go? Hans Christian.
Just a small comment, Sharon, because what is just transition? Well, just transition is all about to ensure that no one is left behind. That's so important for climate change.
Absolutely. And whatever it takes, it will be different in different settings, but it might mean for older workers who are displaced pensions or the gap to pension years if they choose to retire. For younger workers, it can be reskilling, income support. It can be redeployment support, making sure no one's without an income. Or it can simply be being part of the decision-making with communities. And I want to leave you with this thought. In both Oslo and indeed in Vancouver, there are cities, but there are countries who are conscious of their communities. And a roundtable that I was privileged to be part of in Vancouver, the Indigenous peoples were there with a voice, with a vision for their lands and their peoples, and that's what it'll take, all of us together. So this is a fantastic story of a journey in transition. It'll be a just transition, but it is about the opportunity to grow an inclusive economic future for everybody. So give them a big hand. Thank you very much. And now let me invite three very courageous and leading companies, renewable energy companies, to the stage. First of all, Yorgos Papandimitriou. Thomas Brostrom. And indeed, Stephen Shege. Stephen is representing Safaricom. Indeed, Thomas is representing Oersted, and Yorgos is representing NL. I want to start with you, Yorgos, and I want to say what I know about NL is that it, first of all, has union agreements with its people. It's an Italian company. It actually has agreements around just transition. It has procurement agreements that cover the world throughout Europe. In fact, we will hear that the CEO actually is chair of the Euroelectric group of companies in Europe. They've committed to just transition, and now these three companies are committing to a pledge around just transition, and we'll hear a bit more about that. But Yorgos, what does this mean for you? I mean, you've made it a just transition commitment in the way you do business, but tell us what that means practically.
Well, thank you, Sharon. For us, I think we should start by saying, for us, being responsible, just transition means being responsible, and we're working, and we know that we can be responsible, but also grow and be profitable at the same time. Enel, as you said, has embraced just transition. Enel, also our CEO, Francesco Starace, being president of Euroelectric, has convinced about the importance of just transition, and Euroelectric, the European body of utilities, has also embraced best practices coming from the just transition concept. One very brief introduction about Enel. Enel is one of the biggest utilities in the world, and it has pledged to fully decarbonize by 2050. And why is that? It's not only because of social and environmental responsibility, but it's where the world is going, and that it makes also commercial sense. The transition is here. It's a fact. And we, as Enel, have seen this many years ago, and we have actually embraced this transition, industrially speaking, in our business plan, focusing on renewables growth, focusing on grids and on smart new technologies that can enable the customers to actually be vehicles of further penetration of renewables and reduction of fossil fuel consumption, thereby, of course, helping in the grand goal, which is to combat climate change. Enel Green Power, the renewables arm of Enel, is the leading operator of renewables in the world, the #1 operator. And how we do that? We do that by strongly investing, but by committing to reduce CO2. But the way we do it actually is the most important thing, and what is most relevant for this panel is we do it through our principles, which are principles shared also by Just Transition. And this is what our customers want from us. In this country in particular, we're growing very fast. And we're growing not only because we are good in what we do, but because our customers, our PPA clients, some of the biggest companies in the world, like Google, Facebook, General Motors, Bloomberg, Anheuser-Busch, and many other, T-Mobile, and many other, trust us, not only because we deliver good service, but because we are responsible in what we do, in all aspects. And let me just say what I mean by that. We focus on safety of the people that work for us. And we focus on the safety of the people that work with us. So our contractors and our employees, excuse me. This is a key focus, and we embrace this in the contracts that we have. But it's not only that, it's our code of ethics and our sustainable practices. And this is what makes customers come to us, prefer us, because we can only all be good industrially, but what makes us a great company is exactly this focus. And if I just, could add a couple of examples of what this responsibility for us means. It's, first of all, when we enter new territories, we try to build on the training of the people. And one of the most important challenges that we have seen is that where we operate, we have to have skilled labor. So what we're trying to do is support and sponsor educational programs so that the territory itself generates talent that we can then use in the power plants. That's the one. The second thing is that the transition, so another example that we have lived and we are living, is that the transition can at some point cause disruptions, no? And a disruption, for instance, is that you have to, and we have taken the decision to close thermal power plants, particularly in Italy. And that means 23 power plants over 7 years. It's a lot of capacity and a lot of people involved. That means that we have to do something about it. So knowing this, planning this, and engaging in a dialogue, in the end, we have succeeded in redeploying over 600 people already, and this process will continue in new jobs within the company. Okay? And the most important thing is that we actually take these assets and we give them to the territory, to the people, so that they can be used for new uses. So I think what is key is in the transition is actually to know that it's there and to plan ahead, to engage in a social dialogue with the people and then deliver it.
And we've seen it. Think about that. I've been involved in the pain of shutting, one coal-fired power station in a community at a time. 23 in the next 7 years, that's massive. But not only a commitment to workers, as you heard Yorgos say, a commitment to the community, leaving the community with a future, not simply walking away. So we're really grateful that NL has actually signed the commitment, the pledge. And what is this? It is social dialogue, as Yorgos said, with workers and their unions. It's respect for fundamental rights, including freedom of association and the right to be at the table, to bargain collectively, but also including occupational health and safety standards. It's social protection, including how we support and maintain pension and health and other vital guarantees. And of course, it's wage guarantees, including prevailing wage rates, because it's not lost on you to move some of these long-standing unionised jobs to move into wind or solar on lower wages is not something that will build trust. So that's all part of the dialogue. And Yorgos, I can tell you that we enjoy working with NL. We know there'll be differences of opinion, but the dialogue is strong, and the commitment to leaving no one behind is part of the corporate philosophy. So thank you. Give NL a big hand, and Yorgos in particular. And then, of course, Thomas, Oersted is a Danish company. Now, you were kind of ahead of the game, really, because Denmark made the transition years ago now, a couple of decades ago, to wind energy. And so you lead the world, in a sense. But as you're now investing in other countries, what are the challenges, and how will committing to this pledge make it easier for you? Is it just because you feel responsible, or do you think you can build together with working people a better growth model?
No, thank you, Sharon, and great to be here in San Francisco for a very timely and important summit. So I'll just start out by saying that, yes, it's right, we have been at the forefront of transitioning ourselves. We used to be Danish Oil and Natural Gas, Dong Energy, and we just recently changed our name to Oersted to better reflect who we are. So if you just spend a few seconds on where we are coming from, then you can see we've been all about oil and gas and coal-fired power plants until basically 10 years ago, where we took a very bold and strategic decision to turn towards more renewables. We were starting to invest more and more into offshore wind and other renewables, and we basically found a path where we could see we could grow much more sustainably. We've been on this journey, I would say, since 1991, where we built the world's first offshore wind farm in Denmark, and since then we have added to that. Through that transition, obviously, we have looked to use the resources we already had in the company. One of the things we had was people who were very good at working offshore with oil and gas. We've basically used those competences and skills to deploy them into offshore wind. And for us, basically the combination of having the skills, but also seeing this is where we think the world goes. I think it helps, as you say, Sharon, that we are a Danish company that invented more or less wind power. For us to make that move has become even more easy. Then I'll just say a few words on what we're doing right now in the sense of also getting the right skills out to newer markets. So we have set up shop here in the United States, in Boston 3 years ago, where we are pursuing offshore wind along the eastern seaboard. And one of the things we are faced with here is actually how can we get the knowledge transfer, how can we get the skills that we have in Europe to be here in the United States. So we have worked with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, we've worked with Mass Maritime, we have worked with Bristol College community to basically have the right training programs, apprenticeship programs, and in that way also make sure that you get the right skills here. So we are quite used to also working with unions and labor unions. It's one of the areas where I think as you transition away from fossil fuels, there are jobs that are going to leave. We can actually use those jobs in what we do in renewables. I would also add that now we're on the West Coast. We have a project up in British Columbia. We work together with our local partner, Nikoon, and we're hoping that British Columbia will also move forward with more clean energy, and we also committed to do that. So I'll say for us, it's yes, we are committed to achieve this vision through just transition. It's a fairly easy one to step into, but actually, as you look at it, we have now divested both oil and gas. We are also converting all our coal-fired power plants into power plants using biomass, and we are definitely committed to keep improving ourselves as we move on.
Yeah, it's a great news story. And indeed, I can tell you that the partnerships keep evolving, because Climate Jobs New York, with the New York governor, who's very progressive, as you know, they've actually been talking to our Danish pension funds, which are workers' capital in Denmark, about investing in the big offshore wind plans, so outside of New York. So it indeed is a win-win for everybody when we start to build these partnerships and work across together with a just transition lens. Now, Stephen, change of pace. You're not a renewable energy company. Safaricom's a communications company, and Bob Collymore, who is Stephen's CEO, Bob Collymore and I both are leaders on the B team, and he and I share co-chair responsibilities for the discussions and the plans for modelling business and human rights in B team companies who know that the world of business has to change. So I can tell you that Bob Collymore actually took an objective, which was to make all our workplaces 100% human, places where people could be human beings, and put it into one of the key objectives of the business plans of the company. So tell us what Just Transition means for you, Stephen, in the context of a communications company.
Thanks, Sharon. As you said, we don't come from a traditional high-carbon industry. But for a company like Safaricom in Kenya, we are a mobile company that serves 29 million Kenyans and is the largest mobile company in Kenya and East Africa. As Sharon has said, Bob Collymore, my CEO, wants to look ahead and see what role we can play as an organization to shape what is going to be the country's view of a just transition. And in doing that, we're putting the community in the center of this all. How we transition from to a net zero future means that we have to look at the opportunities that are created by using alternative energies. I can give an example of what we've done with solar. As a company, we've started shifting a lot of our network from diesel power to solar power. And that has also allowed us to come across new inventions that have helped the community move away from fast scope emitters like kerosene to using solar. And this is what we're saying about putting the community in the developments that we're doing around our journey towards a net zero future. What we're also doing is a lot of advocacy. In countries such as ours, companies like Safaricom have a big voice. We have the chance to sit with government and ask them to shape their policies to think about providing jobs that are climate anchored. As long as they sign these agreements and become part of the Paris Agreement and such movements, they also have to equally put policies in place that ensure that jobs are able to be created around such directions. So for us, we are working in this space not because we come from a very difficult past where we have to make a significant shift, but because we want to look forward and prepare the country for a different direction that is shaped around a very environmentally centered and carbon neutral position.
Well, yeah, give them a big hand. And of course, Stephen represents not just a company thinking about how it actually achieves net zero, because that's the commitment that all B team leaders make. But in fact, it's also about, as a buyer of energy, how they make the commitment to actually purchase renewable energy that, of course, Yorgos and Thomas represent in terms of production and distribution. So it's a great partnership to see. There are other companies signed up to this pledge, and we encourage many more of you to actually sign on. Let's help you create the dialogue tables that will get the dialogue going, develop the partnership, have the plans that can be then advocacy plans for communities, and let's build the trust and the optimism of indeed an inclusive 21st century economy where we shift the value set and put people at the centre of productive enterprises. You have 3 great examples, leaders in that regard from these companies, so give them a big hand. And now, of course, I'm going to hand you over to Sarah White, who is the Deputy Director for Equity, Climate and Jobs at the Californian Workplace Development Board. And Sarah's going to lead you through the next panel, and then you will hear closing remarks from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. But let me say, Sarah, as I hand you the mic, California is a star. There's no doubt about that. They started before most people with progressive legislation in the 90s. When you actually talk to government leaders or community leaders and the Californian unions and communities, people share a view about a sustainable future. And don't underestimate the power, not just in terms of people and the optimism, but as the 5th largest economy in the world, this is significant. So Sarah, welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be joined today by my colleagues Aida Cardenas from Building Skills Partnership and Robbie Hunter. Aida is the executive director there. Robbie Hunter is the president of the California State Building and Trades Construction Council. Sorry about that. So I'm going to do a little bit of setup, and then we'll turn it over to them. We've been charged with talking about state-level action. And California, of course, as Sharon pointed out, is a subnational actor, but we have the impact and the leadership of a national actor. And so I'm really proud today to say that the Brown administration is committed to achieving its ambitious climate goals while at the same time ensuring that the economic benefits of the low-carbon economy accrue to all Californians. Calling for inclusive economic growth presupposes that good jobs will emerge as a co-benefit of climate investments. But the U.S. experience over the past decade has suggested that that is not enough. It is not enough to promise job creation. States must use public investment to intentionally build quality jobs and accessible pathways into them. So let me say this again, because we'll hear a lot about jobs over the next year. But it's not enough just to create jobs and count them and consider that a good job. You need to ensure that we're talking about creating quality jobs, because California is committed to an equity agenda. And our work is premised on the idea that you can't deliver equity without job quality. Our goal is to connect Californians to middle-class careers, not dead-end, low-wage jobs. So quality jobs, in our mind, have a number of characteristics, right? They're not just decent wages for working families, paid time off, health and retirement benefits, fair scheduling, transparent contracting, access to training, worker voice, worker agency. All of these things go into adding up to job quality. And we think that we no longer accept environmental degradation, high emissions, and pollution as the cost of economic progress. So we think we should no longer accept sweated labor as the cost of environmental progress. With this in mind, for the first time, California is developing an integrated, comprehensive workforce plan to accompany its comprehensive climate mitigation plan. This high road and climate plan delivers calls for shared prosperity in a low-carbon economy. And for the first time, it will marry the state's groundbreaking climate plan to a bold labor and workforce agenda. The goal is to make sure that across California's multi-billion-dollar climate investment portfolio, we have tied to labor standards to create decent work, and that access to those jobs is shared broadly through training and education with the folks who have been excluded from opportunity. It's based on a simple vision. Labor is not a cost. Labor is an investment. In fact, this is the essence of California's commitment to what we call a high road economy, that firms gain a competitive edge by capturing the value of innovation and skilled labor. Investing in the workforce is a winning economic strategy. Democracy is not just a value. Democracy creates value. So what does it mean to commit to building shared prosperity? We use that term a lot. In California, we believe that we must share the economic benefits of the new economy with the workers who are going to design it, build it, and run it. So that's not just the climate scientists and the hedge fund managers, but the frontline workers in energy, transportation, construction and manufacturing, water, waste, transit, health, hospitality. Every single job in every single industry is going to be impacted by climate change and will in turn impact climate change. So in practice, the way that we are addressing this is that in California, business and labor are working together across the economy to design climate mitigating approaches to work. The state is supporting these efforts through something we call high road training partnerships, which are designed to lift up folks into the jobs that we think will be most abundant in the clean economy. So those will require more than a high school but less than a 4-year degree. These are industry-based, worker-focused partnerships that deliver skills that are needed to achieve California's climate goals while lifting up workers and communities who have been excluded from opportunity or who have shouldered a disproportionate share of climate burdens. So first I'm going to turn to Aida and ask her to tell us how the frontline workers of SEIU have turned into the unlikely champions of California's climate strategy.
Right, great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great introduction of all the work that we're trying to do here and the leadership the state is taking and really addressing and looking at folks who have traditionally been excluded and even excluded from the sustainability conversation. So I'm with Building Skills Partnership. It's a training program under SEIU, United Service Workers West, the union that represents janitors throughout the state of California, as well as other property service workers. And we've been partnering with employers to develop a green janitor education program, a certification program. Janitors aren't the first folks that people think about when you think about sustainability efforts. But guess who's cleaning our offices every night while we sleep in the shadows of the night? They're the folks who are the eyes and ears of operating and maintaining high-tech companies, biotech companies, big commercial office buildings. And there's thousands of them throughout the state of California. They have an impact. They do green cleaning. They are conserving water. They are learning best practices on waste diversion, energy efficiency. They're shutting off the lights that you leave on. And it's important that they understand that when they're walking into a building that has a seal of a LEED certification under the U.S. Green Building Council, that they know that they are part of what gets that seal there, that they are part of the green economy, and they are part of the solution to having more sustainable buildings. So in our program and what we're doing in our certification program is making sure that they're part of the conversation, that they have a seat at the table, that not just are we recognizing the value that they bring to the work that they're doing every night, but that we're investing. We're investing in them to continue to skill them up, to upskill the industry, to get them to understand and comply with what we're trying to do, to understand what are the steps that they can do to be proactive in their buildings to increase our efforts. One of the things that we found in a portfolio and a study that we were able to do with a third party, it was a Seed LA is the name of the group that did a study on places where we did the Green Janitor Education Program, and also was reported by our building owners, is that after doing the program, there is a 5.6 energy savings. Now, energy savings is not all on the shoulders of the janitors. Again, it's a piece of the puzzle. And we can't forget about who's there in the front lines. We can't forget about those SEIU members and all of the workers that help operate our buildings. They deserve recognition for the work that they do. They deserve to be invested in training. And we're very excited with the partnership with the state of California, but also our sort of non-traditional partner, well, not traditional, but not likely partners between labor and management who are really taking the high road and finding a win-win. The employers get to have a more skilled workforce. They're able to provide a higher level of standard of services to their clients, to building owners, and the workers feel excited and invested in. It's a majority immigrant workforce, not just in California, but throughout the country. And they're very proud of the work that they do, and they want to be part of our community. They want to be part in their buildings and in their local community. So they're very excited, and we're very excited of helping these efforts under SEIU.
Wow. Thank you, Aida. It's a fabulous story. We know also that now the vast majority of clean economy jobs are probably going to be in the construction industry across energy and transportation sectors. So, Robbie, how are the building trades delivering opportunity in California's new economy?
Well, the building trades in California, we represent just short of 500,000 workers, 450,000. 62,000 of these workers are apprentices, and they come from all the neighborhoods of Los Angeles. We have what these workers look like. We have a policy of giving preference to kids out of the foster care system and emancipated youth. We have a reentry program that Governor Braun architected, and we have been very successful with that, bringing in workers, young people who live in the tough neighborhoods of LA, raised maybe by a single mother or a grandmother, and didn't have a father to lead them into to be a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician. So that's all a component of what I'm about to tell you. When we first started seeing renewables coming over the horizon, we were worried because we built the coal power plants, we built the oil burning plants, we build refineries, we do all of the industrial work as well as building infrastructure. And we looked at each other with kind of the opinion, we can't go for this. But lucky enough, we had a couple of people around that looked and said, well, if we're not going to build those, what are we going to build? And we turned to look at the renewables, and we saw that this was the future, that there was jobs there, and it was our job to make sure that those jobs were good jobs that could sustain a middle-class family, get training. We could build these projects with a streamlined workforce, highly skilled, done once, done right, under the lowest bid, and that we could survive in that economy. And that was decisions that were made early by the building trades. The result of that, since 2000, we have built 36,000 megawatts of electricity in California. And this goes everything from gas to geothermal, solar, just about any aspect, wind. We've built many, the Tehachapis are just full of windmills that we have put up. And this has really expanded the building trades. It was the opposite of what we were worried about. We were looking at our way of life going away. It has actually expanded our way of life. We built 12,000 megawatts of solar here in California. Do you know what that really is? That's 5 San Onofre nuclear power plants that we built with solar. So, you know, we look around us and we don't see every state doing what we have done. And we have done that because we've got leaders like Jerry Brown. And Governor Brown, as you know, he's a leader in renewable energy and in protecting the environment, but he's also a leader in making sure that working families can get into the middle class, buy a little home, get their kids educated, maybe get them into college. He's always got that balance. We can do this, but we can be fair to workers, and we can do it with a streamlined, highly skilled, well-paid workforce. And he was an architect of much of the success that the building trades have had. We're building a high-speed rail with him. We're looking forward to having a grid across the country of electric trains that are clean, driven by solar power, green energy. And, all I can say is that if we embrace it and we make it work, and we make it work for the working person, then it will be successful, and that's what we have found in California.
Thank you so much, Robbie and Aida. We were only given a little bit of time to tell the entire story of California, so I want you to, we have so much more to say, but I really want you to join us in building the high road here, which is to simultaneously advance equity and mobility for California's workers. We're delivering skills and competitiveness for the state's best employers, and we're addressing the challenges of climate change across the economy. It's a big standard, it's a big thing to do, but we're up for it. And so let's thank our panelists. Yes, and then I need to introduce our next speaker, which is Thomas Baris. He's the Parliamentary State Secretary of the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy in Germany. So thanks much, folks.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for introducing me. Ladies and gentlemen, in the next 15 years, the world will consume 50% more energy than nowadays. Many people are desperate for energy. Still, 1.4 billion people live without access to electricity. It is my deep belief they also have the right to secure, affordable, and environmental-friendly energy. I think no matter whether we are in Berlin, in Washington, D.C., or here in San Francisco, we all agree that fossil fuels cannot be the only answer of this. Therefore, we need to get the message out, renewable and efficiency. And it's also my true belief this country and companies who find the best solutions, technologies and systems will create own growth, prosperity and also new jobs. The energy transition is taking place at many different levels, as we have just heard again. The federal level usually determines the direction of investments and the focus in research and at companies. In prospering industrial countries like Germany and the US, reliable and predictable policy decisions are crucial for long-term investments and growth. The energy transition needs to be driven by as many different market incentives as possible. Policymakers can then feed their efforts into creating the framework conditions, a task which is difficult enough. Let's take the following example. In the past, the funding of renewable power generation facilities was fixed by the German parliament. Today, we have a competitive system based on auctions. This change has shown that taking a market-based approach actually leads to greater cost efficiency. Back in the early 2000s, we paid 50 cents per kilowatt hour. 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Whereas now, the most recent auctions have seen this drop to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. This means we have become 10 times more efficient. In the long term, this benefits all electricity consumers as their electricity costs fall. But we can only gain public acceptance if we keep costs under control. In addition, we have also made progress in energy efficiency. After all, every kilowatt hour of energy that is saved does not need to be generated, transported, or paid for. This is why we have made efficiency a key part of our energy policy, and the motto of our energy transition is efficiency first. Another important component in a successful energy transition is the market design used in a liberalized energy market. Free pricing on the market is designed to ensure that the most cost-effective flexibility option wins, and this enables us to guarantee security of supply as cheaply as possible. This also means that upward and downward swings in price are expressly desired. These movements make investments in new storage technologies, for example, worthwhile and enable other market flexibilities to pay for themselves. So what conclusion do we draw here? That the energy transition is a modernization strategy involving considerable investment in Germany, and that we will continue to rely upon the use of market-based process and digitization. We need this in order to implement the energy transition in a technology-neutral and cost-efficient way. A further area for focus in Germany energy policy will be the work undertaken by the so-called Coal Commission. The Commission will make specific proposals as to how we can best bring the generation of coal-based electricity to an end and support structural change in the regions affected. So it is a huge challenge for us because coal generates nearly 40% of our electricity. Using the right measures, we can move forward towards achieving the 2030 targets of 55% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared with 1990. And I want to add, the ETS, our cap and trade system, is still the main driver in this process. Ladies and gentlemen, let's join together to drive the energy transition forward, also in the heating and the mobility sector. I'm optimistic that we will succeed in this if we see the energy transition as a real modernization strategy involving considerable investment and innovation, and if we focus on using market-based process to implement the energy transition in a technology open and cost-efficient way. For many years now, global investment in renewables has been much higher than investment in fossil technologies. As successful business regions, we, California and Germany, ought to be able to take a slice of this cake. In 2017, more than 36% of the electricity consumed in Germany was generated from renewables, and carbon emissions were almost 30% lower compared with 1990. In the same period, our economy has grown by more than 50%, and our industry share still equals 25%. So that shows it works. Thank you very much.
turn it up. Somebody save your soul, cause you've been sinning in the city. I know too many troubles, all these lovers got you losing control. You like a drug to me, a luxury, my sugar and gold. I want the good life every good night, you're a hot one to hold. Cause you don't even know